it's a great honor for us to have Mr. Lodi Gyari join us to talk about one of the very important issues I think all of us will be very interested in. And Lodi, we know, has been His Holiness Dalai Lama's special envoy for many years, just stepped down last year. That, in his words, has been liberated him so that he can do more things for the cause of Tibet. And, you know, he doesn't need much introduction, but I still cannot help saying something about him. He was, he became very active for the Tibet cause when he was 20-something. By the age of 30, he became the youngest parliament speaker for the Tibetan community in exile. And then he went to United States in 1990. I would say that he single-handedly put the Tibet issue on the political agenda, not just in the United States, but in the entire international community. And after that, he has, as I said, been a special envoy of His Holiness Dalai Lama, and then led 9 rounds of dialogue with the government of People's Republic of China. But what I want to emphasize here is that behind this 9 rounds of dialogues, he has made a relentless effort to make sure the communication will be maintained, to make sure that people will understand what the Tibet cause means, and to make sure that the trust, minimum trust, will be maintained. This kind of backstage, back-screen effort is remarkable, and I can be a personal witness of that. And of course, today, and as I said, it's a privilege and honor for us to have you here. Please join me. Warm welcome.
Thank you, my friend, Dr. Jing. It's also an honor for me to be back here. I thought it was only a few years back, but it seems more than that. But anyway, it's good to be back here, and we're delighted, Professor, that you came again. You know, I have much respect to you. And I'm also very happy that you have a very prominently displayed the International Campaign for Tibet. So I'm sure they'll be very happy, even though I'm not speaking today, you know, as the chair of the International Campaign for Tibet. I'm speaking as Dr. Jing says, a liberated person. But nevertheless, I think they'll be delighted because every organization, you know, wants to see their name, you know, up on the board. So, but I, you know, felt that by being here, being invited, you know, by the school, you know, I should try to once again meet some of you to share my thoughts. I don't come with any blueprint or roadmap, you know, how to resolve the Tibet issue. If I had a, you know, blueprint or, you know, roadmap, I will not be discussing about it. I will have solved that because, fortunately or unfortunately, for the last 30 years, you know, I have been the key interlocutor on behalf of His Holiness with the Chinese government. But those 30 years, you know, has been challenging, disappointing because I left the responsibility without really making any major breakthrough. However, those 30 years of my dealing with Chinese government has somewhere and deep in my heart has given me some hope. It is very difficult for me to pinpoint. If you ask, you know, which some of you may, you know, Mr. Gyari, what is it? What was it that you have this hope? I may not be really able to articulate. You know, it's one of those gut feelings that you have. So that's why I felt that even after my retirement from my responsibility, I felt both as a Tibetan, but also as, to be very frank, a global citizen, that those 30 years of my experience in dealing with Chinese government and nearly, half a century of dealing with the international community on behalf of His Holiness and Tibetans, that I should continue to make whatever contribution that I can make. And one contribution that I can make is going around candidly sharing my thoughts, because I believe these days any issue, even the issue of Tibet, I don't think it's just my business, to be very frank. I think it's everyone's business. I mean, here I may speak a little bit more as a Buddhist, though I'm not a scholar, of interdependence. Because if you really carefully examine, I don't think there's any single issue that is not unrelated. So therefore, you see, I come to you to speak to you because I feel that this is an area, like any other issue, that we all must make, some common effort. Dr. Jiang, for example, when he was at the Brookings, he was of great help. He was doing it not because he is a pro-Tibetan activist, but as a scholar, and also, to be very frank, I think as someone who is born in China, therefore obviously as someone who also has tremendous pride of that culture, that nation, he also felt, and then we worked very closely. And for example, I have always felt that even His Holiness must have the opportunity to expose him more to Chinese scholars, to Chinese from mainland China. Because we live in the West, and quite often His Holiness meets with a lot of Chinese. He makes extra effort. There are two categories of people that he always makes extra effort to meet. One is the Tibetans who come from inside Tibet. Almost everyone who wants to have an audience with him, he'll get it. Those of us who live in India, we may never get an audience, even if you wait for 4 or 5 months. But if someone is coming out of Tibet, he will give highest priority. The other is his Chinese friends. He feels that it's very important, for him to meet with any scholars, young people, if possible, even some officials, to understand. However, my feeling is that he meets with more Chinese friends who will most probably tell him what he wants to hear. And also we have a number of Chinese who are active in the democratic movement. I admire them because I love democracy, but to be very frank, I think many of them are out of touch with the realities in China. Well, they mean well, but they sometimes tell us that, oh, wait a minute, don't be in a hurry, first China will change, and some of us will go back and most probably be running things in China, and then we can talk about Tibet. Well, they mean it, but I felt it is very important even for His Holiness to be able to meet with people who may respect him, but may not fully agree with some of his views. And that's why we worked very hard together to bring quite a few prominent scholars from inside China, so that His Holiness has an opportunity to meet with people who respect him, but who really have, on some issues, fundamentally different views with him, and share that to him, bluntly. So all these efforts, you see, so my being here today and sharing with you are in that same manner. Now, the issue of Tibet, starting from 79, I think both Deng Xiaoping and His Holiness the Dalai Lama took very bold and very important steps. Because, issues such as this, any issue, today you look at the Middle East, wherever, what you need sometimes is leaders who are willing to make unpopular, maybe risky, but difficult decisions. So I must credit, Mr. Deng Xiaoping, because in 79, he took the first step. It was he who reached out to us. And his, typically Deng Xiaoping, his message was very precise, very clear. He said, if you wanted to talk about independence, there are different translations. Some use the word separation, or some say independence, whatever it is. If you want to talk about separation or independence, then there's nothing for us to discuss about. Don't waste your time, don't waste my time. But if you're not talking about independence, if you're not talking about separation, then everything could be discussed. So that was precisely brief but a very clear message that was sent by Deng Xiaoping in 79. And His Holiness very courageously also responded by sending fact-finding delegations. And then in 1982, I, and together with two other senior people, went for our first exploratory talks, 82 and 84. Those were times where I see now looking back, there was definitely possibility. Deng Xiaoping was in full command, a person who is willing to take difficult decisions. And similarly, His Holiness was fully committed. But then, unfortunately, what happens is sometimes events unrelated to Tibet, unrelated to China, both domestic and international, comes in the way. And many other smaller misunderstandings also. For example, I don't think it was the intention of Deng Xiaoping, but then when we actually got into serious discussions, some of the officials wanted to talk more about the past than the future. And that's where the problems come on. Because I bluntly used to tell my counterparts, let's not go back to the past. Past really doesn't bring that of great memories. Even in the recent past, there are bitter memories. So why do we want to revisit the past? Of course, we cannot forget the past. You cannot rewrite history, but leave it there for the time being. Let's discuss about today, and more importantly, let's discuss about tomorrow. So these are, difficulties started coming up. And then global events, in my view, what had happened in the former Soviet Union. The giant changes, extraordinary, unprecedented changes that had happened. And changes in East Europe. And then I think, it has different effects. And in China, I think, Deng Xiaoping became worried. And for good reasons, again. Because he looks at what's happening in Russia. Then he looks also what is happening in East Europe. I think, becomes much more cautious and worried. Now, in the Tibet movement, in the Tibetan world, there's a different kind of reaction. Even though His Holiness sits very firm with his commitment, obviously Tibetans, especially young activists, like any other, gets very much encouraged, very much moved by what's happening, especially in Eastern Europe and the Baltic countries. So this kind of events, and there's several, we don't have enough time, but I'm just giving an example, is sometimes it's not just the Tibet-China issue, it is other global issues that also come in the way, creating, doubts, misunderstandings. In those days, again, I used to be, engaging Chinese, but I was also very active. I went to the Baltics. I used to go around, not because we wanted to have a different game plan, but Chinese, of course, became very suspicious. And if I was in Beijing watching me, maybe I would have become suspicious, even though my intentions are different. Then finally, the Tiananmen, tragedy, that had a profound impact on our relation. I personally believe, I'm not a historian, but I believe that had that not happened. Now, you see, I always want to be very careful when I talk about that. What had happened is really tragic. And obviously, particularly those young students, I have a great admiration. It was tragic, but looking historically, if that had not happened, now it happened, as I say, it had to happen. There were reasons at that time. But if you look back historically, if that did not happen, I think China would have changed. China would have been much more, not too much, not to the extent that you and I want, you see, but I think there would have been more political liberalization. But that happened. So that obviously made Chinese leadership, particularly, Deng Xiaoping, even more worried. It's one thing to see the events unfolding in other parts of the world, but to see what is happening right there under his nose. Now here also comes a little bit about the personality and the, what you call it, the principles. His Holiness is a religious leader. Profoundly, I'm Dr. Jing has met him, profoundly honest, profoundly devout Buddhist. So when I vividly remember when the Tiananmen Square tragedy happened, I think it was, I happened to be at home, and all of a sudden, a car started honking, from above my house. I went out, and it was one of the chauffeurs of His Holiness. Said, "Oh, you're wanted immediately, you have to come up to the palace." So normally, in our tradition, we try to put on kind of robe that we wear when you go in presence of His Holiness. But he said, "There's no time, And I think just now a friend asked for Tenzin Geshe, who used to be His Holiness Principal Secretary. He said, "Oh, Tenzin Geshe is already waiting for you." So I didn't even put on my official robe. I just quickly put on a shoe and rushed up. I have never seen His Holiness so much agitated, so much saddened. I walked into the room and I saw him a little bit like Napoleon image. He wasn't even turning around. He was just looking through the window, his back towards us. When we walked in, he says that, "Did you see? Did you see?" What he meant is, remember, Tiananmen, came to all our living rooms, because by then the television has already come. So that is what he meant. He said, "Did you see? Did you see?" So we said, "Yeah, yes, Your Holiness." So then he turned around. He says that, "I want the two of you to prepare a draft statement for me, very strong statement, expressing my support for the students and expressing my sadness how the authorities are handling it." Now, at that particular moment, I was, and me and some of my colleagues are very busy trying to set up a meeting in Hong Kong with our Chinese counterparts. Because in our relation there has been breakdowns, after every few years, then we try to reconnect, a few years. So it was one of those periods that we were trying to reconnect, and we have already agreed to have a, informal meeting in Hong Kong. So immediately for me, you see, I'm being just, selfish Tibetan, you see. I wasn't, Dalai Lama, because he's concerned about others. He really has this big compassionate heart. For me, it is the issue of Tibet. So immediately my mind says that if His Holiness makes a strong, critical statement, this is definitely going to jeopardize our effort to reconnect. And he immediately sensed my body language. He said, "What is it? What is it?" And I very frankly told His Holiness, I said, "Your Holiness, maybe in a few days' time, we may get a final answer from the Chinese government about restarting, our talk." And I said, "We are already in touch with them, and some of us are, thinking of heading to Hong Kong very soon." Then he was kind of silent for a little while. So I thought, oh, my advice has prevailed. He's most probably going to say that, "All right, make a mild statement," or, "Okay, let's not do it for a few days." But then he kind of, became even more stiff and energized. He says, "That's true, that's true. Yes, it may." But he says that, "How can I, if I cannot speak out today, ever have the moral right to talk about freedom for my people if I do not speak out?" And at that moment, I really felt very deep reverence to him, because I said, this makes the difference between Dalai Lama and Lodi Gyari. I really felt that, yes, you see, I'm being rational, I still believe that, my concern was correct. But then I really come to admire him even more. He knew that it is going to cause setback for his own issue. But then he felt that on a bigger kind of, issues such as democracy and freedom, one must not fail to speak out. So, fully energized, with deep reverence, so Tenzin Geshe and I prepared very strong statement. His Holiness became one of the few global leaders to actually come out with that early statement. Remember President Bush, this is Senior Bush, took a lot of time to come out, and other leaders. But such as this, so I want to share with you such events, sometimes global, sometimes events that you see neither the Chinese leaders nor we had any control whatsoever, have always, derailed or brought about hindrance. Then sometimes even, others, such as the US-China relation. As Jing, mentioned, I spent, best part of my time in the last 20 years in Washington, D.C. And fortunately, I've been, I think, quite successful. So much so that I think somehow the issue of Tibet actually became a very much integral part of the bilateral US-China relation. But then we have to pay prices sometimes, because US-China relation is such a complex. It has, multitude of, so there are times that the relations are smooth, but quite often the relations are very, rocky. So what happens? We get, victimized, because on the bigger issues, neither Beijing nor Washington is going to, pull back, to be very frank. But then to show the irritants or unhappiness, then it is issues such as, Tibet. That also happens several times. Now, having said that, it has also given us advantage. I mean, I'm not saying that, there are certainly advantages, because sometimes both sides are very happy with each other and they wanted to show some gesture. And that gesture sometimes becomes opportunity for us to have a resumption of the dialogue, etc. But I say all that is because sometimes people just look at the whole thing and said, well, last 30 years, nothing had happened. A lot of things had happened. But a lot of things could not happen because of many, many important factors and events. But I still have, tremendous, respect for Mr. Deng Xiaoping for his earlier, very courageous moves. Another person that, again, I have a lot of reverence is Hu Jintao. If I say it, it may be unfair, because there may be, I'm sure, other leaders. But, I know for one thing that this is one person who understood the issue, who genuinely wanted to resolve it. I think he's one of those leaders who did not see Tibetans as something different. I think he was able to somehow understand them as fellow citizens. See, this is also a problem, I'll be very frank, because quite often, the Chinese leaders, they of course always said that Tibet is part of China, so I don't challenge that at all. In fact, as I said earlier, we will have never gone to Beijing if we are challenging that. We have very clearly said that we will walk out, find a solution within the framework of one nation, that is People's Republic of China. Even we have said that within the framework of the Chinese Constitution. But it is also very important that the Chinese leaders must see the Tibetans, Tibet, as a part of that nation again. Because quite often, psychologically, they still see, Tibet as, kind of a backward, God's forsaken, kind of, stretch of land somewhere there in the West. But, people like, Hu Jintao, had a different, approach. He had even the courage to apologize, which I know made many of his colleagues very unhappy, because they thought, how can we, the big brother, apologize to these little, Tibetans? But I think that actually made me have a tremendous respect, because if you're a great leader, if you really think that all nationalities within PRC are fellow citizens. So when he went to Lhasa, he got so upset. and also the high altitude sickness, because he actually, the first day he came up, he was so active, he went around, and then he was so mad, he was, banging on the table, scolding the officials. And next day, I think he was bedridden because of, the altitude. But he said, what have you done with all the money we have sent? Did you dump them in the river Tsangpo? And then remember, he was one who instructed large number of Han cadres, gradually go back and train Tibetans and hand over many of the responsibility to local people. So he was one person. But unfortunately, here I feel that sometimes we have done a little bit of disservice, when I say we, the Tibetans, to Hu Jintao. If you remember correctly, when he was finally criticized and then purged, out of the 9 criticisms or charges, one was his handling of Tibet. It was not the number 1 or number 2, but it was one of the 9. And I feel, in a way, really very sad, because, I think we contribute to that, because we have also failed to positively respond to some of his very genuine offers. They may not be to our satisfaction, but we should have seen the genuineness of it, the sincerity of it. Had we done it at least in one front, he could have, had something to say that, I have succeeded. So from that point, I feel. But anyway, so in the early 80s, there was tremendous opportunity. And now looking back, I think both sides really have, missed opportunities. Again, it's no use, kind of crying, what had happened, you see. But I say this also because I believe it's important for us Tibetans also not always point the accusing finger at the Chinese. Because, like when you point the finger at someone, you have 3 little fingers actually pointing towards you. So one of the things now that, I'm liberated, it is my intention to be quite frank, to say that where, in some areas where we may have also, misunderstood, miscommunicated, and somehow also failed to take opportunities. Now, what is the purpose of saying that is finished? No, I want to say it particularly for the future generation of leaders among Tibetans, and also in Beijing, to see that they don't repeat, that they learn from some of the mistakes and some of the opportunities that we have missed. But I think the major breakthrough, if I can call it, actually happened, during President Jiang Zemin's time. I give him kind of credit, because precisely also it was not easy for him. Because of the Tiananmen Square especially, Deng Xiaoping towards the end in his life became quite disappointed with His Holiness, quite disappointed, because he took it very personal. And as you know, the whole Tiananmen tragedy, it was very personal. It was he never wanted to admit that it was that he was wrong. So anyone who criticized, especially His Holiness, and I was told that Mr. Deng Xiaoping, since he has spent some years in France, I believe he and I think the Chinese diplomats who are posted in Paris every time sends him croissant, because he's very fond of the French bread, but also French newspapers, clippings of, and unfortunately Le Monde, an interview, and in fact I was there with His Holiness when that interview happened. But the media is a great. I respect, and but media can sometimes unintentionally, create also huge problems and misunderstandings. So Le Monde, I believe, I don't read the French, had a story titled something like, Dalai Lama says that how can Deng Xiaoping allow this to happen? You're talking about the Tiananmen, tragedy, big banner line. So obviously, again, such things like that, when he was very sensitive with the global criticism, and to see So he became, towards the end of his life, very much disappointed. And in fact, it is he who, for a while, just put a hold on the Tibet issue. No one dared to talk to him because he just became agitated if you talk about Tibet or the Dalai Lama. So when Jiang Zemin came into power, we made efforts. And the message that I get back is, look, this is not very easy for him. Such as Hong Kong, Taiwan are easy because he is just going to follow the initiative that Deng Xiaoping has taken it. So there's already the approval, there's already the blessing. But Tibet is different because that file has been shut down. Now for him to revive it, he doesn't have a kind of the mandate. So I say, therefore, I credit him because somehow he did revive it. One of the reasons I think he did it is because, as you know, he put tremendous importance to the US-China relation. I think President Jiang Zemin's foreign policy, or, in fact, major policy during his leadership was the strengthening and the deepening the relation with the United States. So it is in this context, and we kind of also saw it. So therefore, we also worked very hard to approach, to work very closely with the U.S. government, particularly by then, during President Clinton's time. So as I said earlier, somehow, we managed to integrate the issue of Tibet, as an integral part of the bilateral U.S.-China relation. There will never be, and I think I can say it with confidence, any meeting between Chinese and U.S. officials of importance, definitely above the rank of assistant secretary, every meeting, bilateral meeting they have, the Tibet is definitely always one of the issues, and sometimes depending also quite high up on the list. So it is, I think, in my view, as a part of this, Jiang Zemin, decided, to, restart the process, and so I have had number of confidential meetings at different locations in the late 90s. And I must say that those informal meetings actually produced far more result than my formal meetings, which began after 2002. As Dr. Jing mentioned, this 9 rounds, or sometimes, we Chinese say 10 rounds. We have a different interpretation, but 9 or 10 rounds of meetings we have had. There are, I'm not saying they're not important, they were useful, and those of you, diplomats, sometimes official talks are official talks. Everything has been predetermined. Each side has its talking points. You sit down together, face each other, and you go through your talking point, and they go through their talking point. And then you break for lunch, and then you have a great dinner together, and the next day again you go over. But that's an important exercise. This is important exercise. But earlier in the late 90s, I had a number of, I think, really important meetings with the senior people. Now, this was not the United Front. This is directly from Jiang Zemin's office, his own bureau. And it's very clear that he had his concerns. He had concerns, as I said earlier, whether if this doesn't go well, that it can reflect on his handling of the issue. But somehow it was during this period that the relations, for the first time became much more stabilized. But then again, we were caught up. Again, I'll not read the long list of some, directly related, some indirectly related. But at least I should say that he started the process, and then, it continued during Hu Jintao's time. Now, Hu Jintao was, to me, really a disappointment. I say that because he is one Chinese official who had personal experience of serving in Tibet. He was the party secretary in Tibet. Of course, he didn't spend so much time. One, I believe that he had health issues. Two, by then he was already being groomed for far more important responsibilities. So he spent more time, Beijing or Chengdu, and very little time in Tibet, even though he was the party secretary. But he governed through proxy, through hand-picked people. So I and many of us really felt that, okay, now maybe for the first time, we will have, you see, at the highest, a person who really had actually served in Tibet. And that he will have a better understanding both, the difficulty aspects, the problems, but as well as the importance of resolving it. And I think that was, misread by some of us. Of course, I'm not surprised. I mean, China is the most difficult thing to read, because many people kind of disgrace themselves by trying to predict about what will happen in China. But this was, disappointment. And I particularly worked very hard because now I knew that there was some sensitivity sometimes with Chinese leaders that the Tibet issue is too much Western-driven. And sometimes they also thought that we are being used as, by the Western nations, to somehow embarrass China or to harm China. So I thought that, well, that's a genuine concern. Though I think we've been, we're not very, very, smart, but I think we did not allow anyone to use us. At least that much, you see, I feel confident. But, they have their reasons to have doubts. So I actually started making effort to see if some Asian leaders will be willing to step in so that I can kind of not say goodbye to the Americans and Europeans, but, that we somehow try to, bring some regional leaders, those who have, let's say, the confidence of the Chinese leaders, including here in this country. I would not want to name names. But for example, just a year before Hu Jintao took over, he made a tour of several South Asian countries. He went to Thailand. I'm sure he came here also, but then he went to Indonesia. So just 1 week before Hu Jintao came to Bangkok, I went and had approached Kun Anand, who was Prime Minister of Thailand, I think twice or thrice, and who we know had a close relation with the Chinese government. And I, fortunately, through friends, had a personal relation with him to urge him to speak to Hu Jintao. Then I went to Indonesia and met with President Abraham Wahid. In fact, just an hour before Hu Jintao walked in for the official meeting, I was with President Wahid, just briefing him. Because I thought, now you see, here's a new leader who may not want it to be seen as being kind of pressurized by the Western countries. Let's go to the more neighboring countries. And no one will think that Indonesia or Thailand is, in a position to pressure, China. And also there somehow this misperception of we being used, by some hostile nations. But it was very interesting, two different reads, because both of them very kindly raised the issue. And they both came back with rather slightly two different answers from Hu Jintao. It very clearly shows, because Kun Anand, of course, is a very highly skilled, politician and a diplomat, and knows the issue, So to Kun Anand, Hu Jintao gave a very standard answer. Oh, well, our doors are open. In fact, some Tibetans have just recently even been to, China. it's standard. But the Dalai Lama must do this, he must renounce independence and so on and so forth. But to President Wahid, Abdur Rahman Wahid, totally different response. Because here is a person, he's of course, a great person, but not necessarily, that much, let's say, informed about the nuts and bolts of the issue. And he may have raised that in a totally different manner, because to him, Hu Jintao very clearly says that by next year, I will become the party secretary. When I become the party secretary, the Dalai Lama and I have to resolve this issue. He also told President Wahid, that I have dealt with this issue and I was the party secretary. So President Wahid was very happy, very excited, because by then, I met with him. I have come back to Thailand. And I was with a mutual friend. And President Wahid calls to say that, Lodi, you wanted to hear, one good news and one bad news. What do you want to hear, the good news or the bad news? So I said, first give me the bad news. He said, the bad news is that nothing is going to happen for some time, till Hu Jintao takes over. And then, he's a great person, but he was not well briefed. He didn't even know that, Hu Jintao was the party secretary in Tibet. He kept calling him governor. He said, Lodi, you didn't know that he was the governor of Tibet? So of course he's the president. So I said, sir, yes, he was, yes, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Anyway, he said that he was the governor. He told me that he was the governor of Tibet. So he said that the Dalai Lama and I will have to resolve that. So so that was good news. He's saying that, I have a very explicit, and then he was very kind to even do a little bit of follow-up. But he did nothing more than just allow the dialogue to kind of continue, which we have begun. And it's very clear that no specific instructions are being issued to the competent authorities to try to make or try to take this issue further. And then, by 2008, I mean, those of you who follow the issue, because then in Tibet, unfortunately, there was this widespread demonstrations, not only in Lhasa, but throughout the Tibetan plateau. That then brought about, major setback. And by then, His Holiness also became very, very, disappointed. He was deeply saddened to see the situation unfolding on the plateau. He kind of felt, both, I think, hopeless and really helpless, because he sees the situation, he sees the suffering of his people, but he also realized there was actually nothing that he could do. He just realized that was, and any one of us, could do that. So this is the time, if you follow, remember, then he started saying that I have no trust and hope in the Chinese leaders. But he still said that, but I do have a hope and trust for the Chinese people. And again, some of us, kind of bureaucrats, of course, we didn't want him to say that, but he is the Dalai Lama. He's very frank, he's very transparent. So he started, also expressing that. And similarly, I think, Chinese government really mishandled that situation. I was in Beijing soon after that, twice, and I told them, no, by the way, as a rule, I never say anything harsh if I have not said it face to face. This has always been a principle that I, really bind myself. I always, if I say something critical, you can be rest assured that I have said it to their face, maybe even much more, strongly. I said that they mishandled it very poorly is, yes, there was unfortunate, demonstrations. It is true that there were images of, Tibetans, with the kind of knife in hand, chasing around some tourists. Chinese people, is unfortunate. But the Chinese government, especially the United Front, gave so much publicity throughout China. For the first time, I saw many of my Chinese friends also really beginning to have some kind of, animosity may be too strong word, but really kind of, saying, wow, we thought the Tibetans are kind of, peaceful people. What are they doing? And it also seems that they just have this deep dislike of us, Han people. Similarly, the Tibetans, not only just ordinary Tibetans, every Tibetan, including party members, senior party members, from that year on for a long time, even till now, there is definitely a kind of almost like a segregation. They are not trusted. There are many stories. For example, quite senior officials from Tibetan areas comes to Beijing for some conference. They walk into hotels because in China you have this identity which says nationality. I do not know why they want to have it. So a person, whatever his name is, down there is a column that you have to fill in. So if you're, Han or, Jiangsu Tibetan. So when they see that the identity doesn't matter, this fellow might be the party secretary of some important county. But, the clerk at the hotel counter has been instructed that every person who is Tibetan is a suspect. So quite often there are many stories where they have clear reservations, but they go there and say that, oh, so sorry, no vacancy. So this kind of thing, I told very frankly to my counterparts, what you are doing is of immense damage to the national unity. You are creating deep animosity that is dividing, because unlike some other nationalities, the Tibetans and the Chinese as nationality never had any problem. I say that with confidence. We had difficulties with some policies, no doubt, but never at the personal level, never. No Chinese was worried to walk into any Tibetan village. If you're driving around, if your car breaks down, and if there is a Tibetan household, because this is told to me by many of my Chinese friends, they just casually walk in, and they're welcomed, given whatever help they need. It is not in some other parts. But that almost, was ruined by what was happening in 2008 and how it has been handled. Until this day, I don't think we have fully recovered. So these are things that had finally, derailed. But now, just to conclude, Jing knows that sometimes, some people call me in Washington, D.C., Mr. Optimist. With some is underlying criticism to say that Lodi is always thinking that everything is going to work out, and so, but one has to be an optimist. I always said that if I did not have the optimism, then this issue will have been weathered away a long time back. It is the optimism of His Holiness. It is the optimism of those of us who are in this movement that we are still around. Unfortunately, the issue is not resolved, but we're still around. Now, my hope is that with, again, change of guards and Beijing, and it will take time, it will take time. There are a number of things, both the global, domestic issues that are confronting, that are, keeping the leadership. But I really certainly hope that the new leadership will have a fresh look. I hope for the first time, Deng Xiaoping's famous quotation, seeking truth from facts. My hope is really that, and I also tell the Tibetan leaders that we too must also seek our truth from facts. Quite often, like any other human being, we also have our own kind of idealized, facts, which doesn't also allow us to get to the real, truth. One of the reasons that I have some, optimism is that I had the opportunity of, knowing and having dealt rather closely with President Xi Jinping's father, Xi Jinping. He was, our counterpart during our first rounds, and someone that I really deeply respect. I was young, very young those days. You see, I had no gray hair. I think I was in my, early 40s or maybe early 30s. This is 1982. And, I saw him, first of all, a person with, a human being. When I say human being, I'm not saying that the other leaders are not human beings. Of course, they're human beings. But sense of kind of, I do not know, I'm sure you know what I'm trying to say. And he showed a special kind of kindness to me because I was young and therefore very vocal. And other leaders were very, very unhappy with me. They kind of, tell me, you just shut up. But he always says, no. We must always give young people an opportunity, because they have things, sometimes they're more creative. And going out of his way. And he understood. And he had a very interesting, because he felt a little bit of ownership of Tibet. In a nice way, Because remember, he was, when Tibet was, to use, a term, liberated, there was first the 18th Route Army, which, was under, part of Deng Xiaoping's, which went through Kham, through Chamdo, through Sichuan. There's another, PLA element that went into Tibet through Qinghai. And Xi Jinping, was the party commissar or the party secretary for that military region. So therefore he felt that he and people like Deng Xiaoping were instrumental in bringing back Tibet to the fold of the great motherland, liberate. But in a nice way, they felt some ownership and also responsibility to protect. For example, Xi Jinping was a great protector of the Panchen Lama. Panchen Lama himself told me, because he felt that he has some responsibility, because it is we who went and liberated, we brought them back to the, and he had affection for the Dalai Lama, because they met in 1954, and when we met, he always carries a photo of the Dalai Lama in 1954. Young, Dalai Lama with him. Then he had another photo of recent Dalai Lama. And he always, quite often will say that, look, he hasn't aged. He really looks still young, I'm very happy. And then he has old Rolex watch, which is very proud. He, first day we meet, and then he says, when you go back, will you please tell the Dalai Lama that I'm still wearing the watch that he gave me. Even during the Cultural Revolution, I was able to somehow keep it. And it still is ticking away. Look, So he had that personal kind of, interest. I mean, this is something that I really admire of the revolutionary leaders in China. I may not agree with some of their policies, but as people, I think they're really different quality. They really, I think, believed in whatever ideology. I may not agree with that ideology, but their belief in that is very sincere. When they talk about having liberated Tibet, I think they genuinely, believe they have done it. You see, that's important. Whether you say I see it different, that's also different. But as far as they're concerned, so that and also I think both with the Tao Ziyang and also with Hu Jintao. This is one Chinese leader, as you all know, in the Politburo, who refused to denounce his comrades. That, so for me, maybe, I'm being just, old, Kampa, because for me, loyalty and being trustworthy is very important. So if some of that gene is with the, President, Xi Jinping, I think, that is, definitely, a factor. But let me just conclude by saying this. Because I think the title of my talk was supposed to be resolving Tibet issues very important for stability of China. So that's what I mean. So I believe not only for Tibet. In fact, this is a title that Jing and his very efficient staff got back to me, and I said, great. But I also felt that, well, it's not just Tibet. Actually, resolving Tibet issue, brings stability not only to China, but to the whole region. This is very, very crucial, because Tibet, is, geopolitically in a place that it has a bearing. For example, India-China relation. Now, these two Asian giants, I see that, relations seem to be improving. Obviously, there are, many aspects, but I always even tell my very close Indian friends, I think that China and India will have a fully normalized relation without resolving the Tibet issue, I think it's very difficult. It is not just physically Tibet being there, but number of issues. And so if we look at all that aspects, now Xinjiang and China, you see that there is, Tibet and Xinjiang, and especially Xinjiang issue, I think is very complex, is very dangerous. Again, I'm not, trying to say that I told you, but during our talks in the beginning, my counterparts from United Front used to lecture me to say that how dare you meet with the Ravi Kadir? What are you people doing with these dangerous people from? And I used to tell them, look, maybe our association brings certain sense to these people. In fact, I have dealt with them, and I'm quite confident that Dalai Lama's message of non-violence. And Dalai Lama, I remember, very clearly told Ravi Kadir when they first met, said, look, I cannot impose you, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking for a solution within the People's Republic of China. That is my decision. I cannot force you, but he told us very clearly, said, I think even for your people, you should look for a solution within China and not without. So I used to tell my counterparts, if I were you, in fact, you should encourage me to say that, Lodi, when you go back, can you please continue to meet with some of these people so that you try to make them believe in non-violence and try to make a commitment to the integrity of PRC. But whatever it is, today it is a very dangerous situation, and I don't think it is going to go away. However, if let's say there is a solution to Tibet, now the Tibet is actually is win-win, because here is the Dalai Lama, who is willing to be a collaborator with the Chinese government to find a solution. Who's willing to say, who's always saying that, walk with me. I'm not seeking independence. And now this person, the Dalai Lama, is in excellent health. But he's not young. He's going to be 80 next year. Now there are some people in China, a school of thought, which I hope will diminish and not increase, who believes that, well, the Tibet issue is all driven by one person, the Dalai Lama. He's getting old. One day he'll no more be there. Once he's gone, there may be small problems, but the big problem will be gone. This is the most dangerous thinking. Yes, when the Dalai Lama is no more there, and there will be time when he is no more there. He's not immortal. And it will be devastating for us, no doubt. We may become, divided. There may be a lot of internal squabbling. We'll become weak. But the resentment and the hearts of the Tibetans, will that go away? No. That will become multiplied by hundreds of times if the Dalai Lama dies in exile without being able to go back. Tibetans, for generations, will hold the Chinese leadership for not giving them the opportunity to sit their eye or to be in the presence of this man that so deeply loves. Besides, in fact, I always fear, let's say that something happens to Dalai Lama, the very next day, my worry is that there will be disturbances in Tibet. Nothing planned, be emotional. outburst of sorrow and hopelessness or helplessness, whatever it is. Now the tragic thing is then you will not have a person who has the moral and the historical authority to calm them down. So again, I said this like reciting a mantra at every talk that I had with Chinese leaders. Don't look at him as your problem. Look at him as your solution. You think the clock is ticking, for us, not for you. The clock is ticking for both of us. So that's how I wanted to, kind of sum up to say that it is my hope. And as I said that, and I want you to, all of you to really feel, and in whatever in your own way, contribute, because it is not just an isolated issue of, whatever number is 6 million we talk about. This is also, sometimes major discussion between me and my Chinese counterparts. They say, oh, there's no 6 million. You cannot say 6 million. So finally I said, all right, I give up. I'm talking about every person, every man or woman who thinks that he or she is a Tibetan, who today lives in PRC. So if there's settlement, I'm not going to say that, okay, deliver me that 6 million Tibetans. No, I'm not going to say that. But, there is lot, so it's not just about them. It is about, especially for China. The People's Republic of China that came into being in 1949. And we consider ourselves under whatever circumstances, because we signed the 17-point agreement. Therefore, sometimes when people said that, so you accept to be part of China, I say, I always qualify. Yes, I'm willing to say that we are part of the People's Republic of China, an entity that came into being in 1949. And let's not go back to history and say that which part you are part, which part you are not. So with that, I just wanted to conclude. I think maybe, I have spoken too much, but once again, Dr. Jing, my friend, thank you for giving me opportunity, and thank you all for coming. I hope I did not bore you or waste your time. So thank you again.
Thank you, Lodi, for the heartfelt talk. And we still have some time left. And question, please be brief, and please also introduce yourself. You can stand behind the mic, and we go from there. Okay, please. Yeah.
Hi, I'm John Whalenbridge. I teach in the English department in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at NUS. Thank you very much for your talk. It was very interesting to hear your very personal interactions, about your very personal interactions with people behind the scenes as a supplement to what we read in the papers. So you brought us up to date. You talked especially about the protests in 2008, and you haven't said about the self-immolations. My question about this kind of protest, which I think we all think is perhaps over now, we hope is, what I'm wondering is, how did you and your colleagues talk about this? And I'm most interested to hear about how your Chinese counterparts spoke to you about this. The sense one gets from the paper, from Xinhua and translation, things like this, is that there's a very mechanical kind of response to it. And I'm wondering if there's other information that you can present to us about that. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Actually, for some leaders in China, not all, even if they have a bad headache, they think it is caused by us. So obviously when they had the disturbances throughout 2008, as you all know, they held us fully responsible for that. Then when the self-immolation started, yes, they, not only that, at one time they even made it a condition for next round of talk. They said, you have to stop it in order for us to be able to meet with you to continue our discussions. And again, both in writing and verbally, I replied. I said, in fact, this is what, one of the main reasons why I wanted to come. To do another round is to precisely discuss this. Because the people who are burning themselves, they are my people. I want this to be stopped, maybe more than you. But it is not I who can stop it. It is you who can stop it. In fact, precisely the reason why I want to come is to sit with you and urge you to take measures. People don't just, get up and, burn themselves. I mean, taking, this precious, life. So it is a culmination of years, and in some cases of generations. It is the suffering of, their parents or their parents' parents, which results into this tragic decision. So it is the wrong policies. It is the wrong way of handling it. These things will stop when you start dealing with the issue differently. Yes, so does that satisfy? Yes, your question?
Well, did you get any kind of response from your counterparts that told you that people were able to hear this as Tibetan speech as opposed to some conspiracy from the dialectic, which is what we read about from the Kuan and things like that?
Well, their response, I think, is, you have read it, because they have always very uniform, it is like a pre-recorded, so I do not know if that really is the response of a particular person that I'm talking to. He or she as a human being may have a different idea, but unfortunately, the script has been prepared, somewhere. So they, of course, always come back and say that, no, we have evidence, that these things are being instigated, from outside. And then, of course, into details, they say that, well, maybe not directly by Dalai Lama himself, but, by, people around him or people connected with him and so forth.
Yes, please.
I'm Surya Narayan from the Institute of South Asian Studies here in Singapore. So the government of India has repeatedly said that the Tibetans in India should not indulge in any political activities, and the Dalai Lama is also said to have given categorical assurance to that effect. But recently at the swearing-in ceremony of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, there were reports that a representative of the Tibetan government in exile was present at the swearing-in ceremony. Does it indicate to you any change in the attitude of India towards the problem of Tibet? And do you expect Narendra Modi government to take up the Tibet issue with the Chinese government in any particular way? The way you described, you wanted the Indonesian president, former Indonesian president, to do. Thank you.
Well, I have always wanted the government of India to be more proactive on the issue of Tibet with China. This goes all the way back to the early 80s, with the successive foreign ministers, foreign secretaries. I've always urged them to take the lead in urging the Chinese to try to resolve the Tibet issue. And I understand, it's very sensitive, and sometimes the bureaucrats in the South Bloc are hesitant, because they feel that if they do that, the Chinese will misread it and they become suspicious. My position is always that if you don't raise it, they become more suspicious. Because, you see, you don't have to be, a scholar or, have a, PhD to understand that, you say, as I said earlier, that of course India has interest in Tibet. And then also the cultural and religious ties between the Indians and Tibetans, is so deep. So when I said, when you don't say anything, I bet I said the Chinese even suspect you more. They have, but if you really speak frankly. Now here, you see, you also, raise about, Narendra Modi and so forth. I don't think, basically, in my view, there will be any changes with regard to the government of India's policy. Government of India, from Nehru's days, again, let's not discuss about how it happened, why it happened. You see, the fact is that, India have accepted Tibet to be an autonomous region within the People's Republic of China. I don't think that will change. And we have, you see, and we have never tried to change that also. Because His Holiness himself is looking for solution within, PRC. So therefore it will be contradictory if we go around lobbying anyone to try to kind of, give us a different kind of, recognition. Because it not only, in my view, will happen, because, there may be some political leaders who have a, personal sympathy, but, the governments, take decisions based on larger, long-term interest of their own country. So therefore, I personally feel comfortable. I personally understand, even though historically I think, Nehru and the advice of Sardar Panikar, I think made a blunder, but we made blunders. The fact is now it is a reality which we also accept. So I don't think one should read too much into, someone being at the swearing-in ceremony, because, of course, the India has been very generous. We are very much cared for. We are very grateful. We have chosen the right country to seek, asylum. In those days, during the Cold War, there was also some suggestion that His Holiness should seek asylum in Thailand or in Sri Lanka, because those are the countries in those days very closely allied with the United States. So maybe temporarily in those days, if we went, maybe they would have received more kind of visible spot. But what happened today? Look at, the situation with these countries. So I think, His Holiness took the right decision to stay in India, which is democracy, which is big nation, where, things don't change. Sometimes, things don't change, which is not good because, economic policies, but sometimes it is good that there is a stability, and also yesterday I was talking with some students. They asked, what would be India's attitude if there is solution to Tibet, if Dalai Lama, can go back. I said, the Indians will welcome it. At the same time, they have never suggested or pressured us to say that, look, you are becoming a hindrance to our relation with China. We would like you to vacate. No, they have never said it, and I know that no matter whichever party comes into power, that situation will never rise, because it is the deep relation that the Tibetans and the Indian people have. At the same time, I think Indians will be very happy if there is if there's a genuine solution to Tibet. Because as I said, that if the Tibetans have control over their culture, their way of life on the plateau, no doubt the tension on the present border situation, which continues, which will continue, can also diminish. So I think, on the long run, it is in everyone's interest. The Chinese government should also understand that we have a deep relation with India. Because many times, people think that, oh, do you speak Mandarin? I said, no. And what do you speak? I speak Tibetan. So it must be quite close to Mandarin. I said, no, it is not. It is close to Sanskrit. It is culturally, we are fortunate to be in these two, giant, great civilizations. So we are very proud to be part of that, ancient Indian civilization, because, we have, alphabets, Kaka, Gaga, Cha, Cha, Ja, 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 and that, our Chinese brothers and sisters must understand, because these are cultural roots, which need to be preserved, respected. But politically, we took a decision, which I think the government of India must be comfortable also, because, on that, Tibet, but India's position, as you know, is kind of conditional. India always says we recognize Tibet to be an autonomous region within PRC. So this is the official foreign department formulation. When they have the chance to read everything text out, then they said that we consider Tibet as an autonomous region of the People's Republic of China.
Thank you. Since the time is running out, let's have several questions together, 3 of them, and the answer. Okay, you first. Or still, okay, you go, please.
Right, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Lodi, for your very heartwarming talk. I have a comment and a question.
Please be brave.
My comment, yes, is His Holiness has been exiled since 1959, right? And I know he preaches, non-violence. Well, I'm not a student of the School of Public Policy, okay, but my question is, religion, it has sort of like divided people. It has sort of got people together united. And His Holiness is the spiritual leader, right? He, I think, relinquished his other role. So, and I mean, Southeast Asia, China, we're all Buddhists, or most of the people are Buddhists. Is there any thought of using religion, as a means to unite the people, rather than looking at, we are going to be autonomous, we are independent? So is any thought given to that? Because I think religion can do wonders. I mean, for non-violence, Gandhi did that. Mandela, I think he did that. So what about that role?
Okay, good. You, please. And then the gentleman there.
I'm Tenzin Getchu's friend, so please say hello. Can you comment, please, on the China policy now of bringing in Han Chinese, a couple thousand a day, extending the rails down to Nepal and India, how that's going over in down south?
Please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dong Dong from China, and I'm a PhD, MPA student in the Kuan public school. I noticed from speech that you mentioned, misunderstanding, misreading, or misconception maybe 7 or more times. My question is that what do you think is the main reason for this kind of misses? So do you think is any solution to resolve this kind of misses? Thank you.
Okay,
thank you. First, about religion, I'm very happy that you raised that. Actually, it was, I just saw that it was on my talking point, but I spoke so much, so I said that let's edit, and that got edited. Yes, I believe that particularly with regard to the Tibet issue, particularly with regard to relation between Tibetans and Han, Buddhism is the most precious vehicle. Is the most precious vehicle, because when different people decide to stay together under one roof, there has to be a number of fundamentally common issues or beliefs that bind them together. Because otherwise you kind of tie them up together, but after a while they again fall apart. That is Buddhism. This is one reason that, as I said earlier, that, many of our Han brothers and sisters, they feel quite comfortable in Tibet. Maybe the climate is harsh, environment is not that friendly, but, they feel, welcomed. This is again one area where I always tell my counterparts, because they, unfortunately, sometimes, these days there are large number of Chinese men and women who have become monks and nuns. And I know in some monasteries, there are not, hundreds, but sometimes even over 1,000 Chinese monks and nuns. But some people in Beijing think that's dangerous. They go there forcefully and, make these, Chinese devotees leave. So I told the United Front, I said, this is the biggest mistake. This is the one factor that really binds us together. After some of the tragic situations, sometimes you see if a Han person walks into some place, he or she may not be wearing uniform. Sometimes people have become a little bit worried. Oh my God, what is it? Why are they here? All that has changed. You know why? Because of the Buddhism. Because now in Tibet, if you go to all the temples, and some temples look too kind of extravagant for me. But anyway, it's good because Tibetan Chinese like very colorful, lot of gold, a lot of brocade. But almost every one of those are being funded by Chinese devotees. Not the government, but ordinary Chinese men and women, and thousands they go. Similarly, Tibetan monks go to various parts of China. So therefore, these days, there's no concern. When the Chinese walk in, especially in a monastery, Sometimes Tibetans, feel very unhappy. They tell the monks, "Why you people? You are not being very kind to our own people. You see, now you are receiving all the Chinese, and they get the royal treatment." Well, yes, it is a fact because they are bringing the red envelope to the temple. So that's very important, and I do hope that again, leaders like Xi Jinping sees this as an important vehicle that genuinely bring us together, rather than something that they had to try to stop. So thank you. So that was very good. Population transfer. I think that's what Well, first of all, this has become, again, those of you who follow it, one of the major criticisms of the Chinese government of His Holiness proposal. And bluntly, even till this day, some of my friends in Beijing, says that, what the Dalai Lama is talking about? The Dalai Lama is saying that he wants to, throw out every Han who lives on the plateau. How can he say that? They said that, he's supposed to be monk, That's absolutely untrue. Absolutely untrue. Because if you become part of a multi-ethnic nation, if you come to that, how can you say that, that we want the whole of Tibetan plateau to be only homogeneously, populated by Tibetan people? But at the same time, for us, the most important is the culture, the Buddhist influenced Tibetan culture, and our language. So everyone will agree that if the number of Tibetans have been reduced to such insignificant, then obviously the language will gradually lose, that tradition will lose. So therefore, what we have said is that consideration must be given to the fact that in Tibetan areas that is predominantly Tibetans, that there must remain in a comfortable kind of position so that their culture, their language is not lost. Yes, so therefore this demographic issue is of concern, but it is not an issue where we have taken a position to say that we want the Tibetan plateau to be free of, and Dalai Lama says that actually we can't really we need them. We need them for a number of reasons. Just as they, I think need. When I said they, you see, sorry again, this is the problem. Both for them and for us. We still talk about them and us. Yes, but you're right. You see, if you are concerned, there's not only Tibet. Now you go to Kathmandu, Nepal. You see, Nepal is also now, there's so many number of, mostly economically driven. Some political, but to be very frank, I think a large number of the people who come to special places like Lhasa are economically driven. That happens, you see, because I live in the United States. Everyone from this part of the world seems to be rushing to get to the United States, just as people from Latin American countries. It's all driven by economic rather than politics. But does it create a political situation? Of course it does. Then third was, it was not very clear, but I think you said that that I talked about miscommunications, misunderstandings, and the past, and what measures could be taken to see that it is not repeated. Is that kind of, yes? Well, I think I said it. I mean, first of all, there will always be some, misunderstandings, some miscommunications. This happens all the time when, in such a situation. But my hope is the reason why I'm kind of, talking a little bit too much about, what had happened. I'm doing it not because I wanted to kind of share with you, something happened, precisely so that in the future we can avoid it. I think there are ways to avoid. One is regular communication. Regularly, if there is a regular channel of communication at various levels, not to take decisions, but simply to make the other side know what is on our mind, what is concerning us. Similarly, if they do that. Now, this is a culture that is very much absent in the Chinese political system. I think, and ours is the opposite. We talk too much. We talk too much, and then we kind of, have a big mouth, and sometimes Chinese get confused. His Holiness says something, then someone else says something slightly different. And then they, of course, get very much worried, because in their system, everything is so much centralized. Everything has been scripted down. And everyone is worried about saying something. So a little bit is a culture, So I think there will always be a problem because we talk too much, and they, they lecture us too much. Every time is kind of scolding. Is not really, talking about saying that how dare you do this? You cannot do this. You must agree to that. But again, I hope. I have something. I said that I have a hope. And I said I cannot pinpoint, but I think I can pinpoint one. Because I've been visiting China since 1982. The changes that I've seen is extraordinary. It's mind-boggling. To use a kind of communist term is like sky and earth, in every regard. So that gives me some changes are not necessarily good, because I think you're not only taking Marxism, which is a Western ideology. Now China have taken the worst form of capitalism, which is also from the West, and that combination I think really has not produced the best. But also there are some very good signs. Where China, I think, is moving in the right direction. So some of this, we have to have a patience to make this kind of, bigger social and kind of attitude changes that is, happening. Thank you.
Okay, please join me.